Selamat pagi. Welcome back to another Bali COVID-19 update. This is January 26, 2022, and my name is Bruce. First, the weather. It is 29.4 degrees Celsius, 77% humidity, and my little wind thing says it is 19.4 kilometers per hour, and everybody that said that it's not working very well, that's probably right, because trees are almost bent over here on the shore, and, well, 19.4 is probably a lot faster than that. There's a lot to cover today. The main stories involve the travel bubble and new planes coming to Bali, according to Sandiaga Uno, but later, not now. He talks about the second and third quarters, and this is related to G20. And so I'll be talking about the travel bubble in both of those and later on as well. Let's start off with the numbers. 7-day average for new positive cases now is up to 46 in Bali, and the 7-day average for deaths 0.4, so it rose, but just a bit. Last time was 0.3. So the numbers are going up in Bali. And what about nationally? Wow, nationally, 4,878 new cases yesterday. So the surge is here. The total number of deaths, 20. So as I've said before, it's never good to have any deaths, but the deaths are far lower than the new positive cases in terms of the rate that they're increasing. So that's good news. And you can see what's happening when you take a look at the testing. 176,407 people were tested yesterday nationally with a 2.77 positive rate, and the 7-day simple average positivity rate 1.72%. So things have gone up quickly, and we're still in this for another, what could be another month. So expect to see the numbers spike up even more in the coming weeks. No reports on testing in Bali yesterday. And what about vaccinations? First dose, 3,895,687, 86.2% of the population. Second dose, 3,399,761, 75.2% of the population. And big pushes around the island to get everybody vaccinated, get the booster shots, and the kids to get them all with their second shots. And in Bulalang, every day there is information posted on social media, and if you live in a different district, a different regency, different kabupaten in Bali, and you have a link to where your information is about where testing is being done, where vaccinations are being done, please put a link down here. Thanks. And yesterday, 30,206 additional doses were administered in Bali, so ramping up the vaccinations. And what about new numbers? New numbers in Bali yesterday, 96, so we're getting close to 100. Remember, we were down to like 0? Oh. And recorded deaths, 0. Great. Active cases have gone up 384. So while the numbers are not looking good compared to before, in relation to what's happening around the world, we're still in pretty good shape. Although these national numbers, I expect that they're going to go up even more. So let's take a look at the main story, which is Sandiaga Uno talking about increasing flights to Bali, but not right now. And here's some more on Bali. Sandiaga Uno says international flights to Bali to be increased ahead of G20. The government plans to rearrange flight regulations to ease airlines in carrying passengers. Okay, that's good news. He said Bali will be prepared to have new regulations because this province is the location for various international events. Even though Bali's been open, direct flights cannot be realized. They haven't been realized. He said that the plan to increase flight frequency is in line with the travel bubble scheme that's being explored with various countries. The travel bubble is a scheme to open tourism gates between countries during the pandemic. Through this scheme, countries will agree to open borders and allow their citizens to travel in certain areas that have been determined. At present, Sandiaga Uno ensured that Indonesia is discussing possible ties with Japan and India. I hope there's going to be more than that for the G20. He hoped that the plan on increasing the direct flight frequency could be carried out in the second or third quarters, since G20 meetings and side events will be held in November. The second or third quarters is still a ways away. According to Sandiaga, several foreign airlines expressing interest in opening direct flights to Indonesia via Bali over the past 6 months have included UAE, Qatar, Japan, India, and Turkey. He said, we'll assess later which country is the most prepared. Australia is also the most realistic choice because there's lots of visitors that want to come here. But we're waiting for the readiness of the local government, okay? And so this translation here, I went back and looked at it, and so I translated it because I was confused about what local means. Does he mean local Indonesia, local Bali, local Australia, local Queensland, local New South Wales? I'm not sure. So I looked it up, and then I took the translation as related to Australia. But having a conversation with Michelle on here over the last video, at first she said she thinks it's Indonesia, and then she said, no, well, I don't know. And I asked my son, who grew up speaking Indonesian as his first language, English as second language, and he said it could be either one. It is confusing, and said take your pick. And so I don't know. But, well, let's hope that the Australian planes get in here. I know that Jetstar has had flights on and then canceled, flights and canceled. And so we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. It's frustrating, I know, frustrating for everybody, including me. So I don't know, sometimes these articles that get your hopes up and then whoosh, they go nowhere. The balloon is popped, it's burst, it's over. And so we'll just have to wait and see, as always. And so the travel bubble is being talked about. It's the news right now in Indonesia for the last 2 days, and there's a travel bubble opening between Indonesia and Singapore. And according to the Straits Times, inquiries about this travel bubble and getting into Indonesia for vacation are way up. And so Singaporeans want to get out and visit Indonesia. So what is this travel bubble? Well, the circular has been out, and so there's specific information on the travel bubble, and they're going to go through this really quickly. And this pertains right now to the travel bubble with Singapore, but supposedly it will also be used with the Mandalika GP coming up in March, and then with G20 delegates coming in. And of course, could be modified as things in Indonesia, well, and everywhere in the world, are very flexible concerning the virus. So what is the travel bubble? Complete travel bubble, matters and rules that are applicable in Indonesia. And so the travel bubble is a scheme to open tourism gates between countries during the COVID-19 pandemic. And yesterday, President Jokowi was out in Riau in Bintan Regency checking out how things are going there. And he'll be having a meeting with the Singaporean Prime Minister. And one of the discussions will be preparations for plans for the inauguration of the travel bubble for Batam and Bintan in Singapore. Okay, so let's get to specifics about the travel bubble. The travel bubble is regulated in Circular Number 3 of 2022 concerning the health protocol for foreign travelers. The travel bubble mechanism in Batam, Bintan, and Singapore areas during the COVID-19 pandemic following the reopening of a productive and COVID-19 safe tourism sector. In the circular, it's explained that there are requirements for facilities and infrastructure used in the travel bubble area, such as, and let's go through them, having a minimum of supporting staff that includes safety operational personnel and supervision of health protocols, health handling personnel, at least 1 doctor and 1 nurse, and 3 supporting staff for implementing health protocols, minimum administrative staff, cleaning staff, and cooks. Having a monitoring system for the implementation of health protocols, such as television cameras. Okay, they're going to make sure people are doing what they're supposed to. Having lodging rooms that meet requirements, such as having windows and adequate ventilation, adequate lighting, covered trash cans, and plastic for infectious waste. Easy to clean room mats and bathrooms in each room. Having lodging rooms for more than 1 person or family and meet the requirements according to the standard health protocol for lodging rooms, equipped with supporting infrastructure, namely an area that serves for specimen collection and health observation and delivery and pickup point area, registration area, decontamination or disinfection area, outdoor activity area, specimen collection area, examination area, and health check place. Then a separate quarantine and isolation room from the travel bubble area and a special restroom for support personnel who are directly involved in implementing, monitoring, and supervising the health protocols. And there's more. Having waste disposal facilities that meet environmental sanitation standards, have equipment, disinfection material, and the availability of sufficient personal protective equipment, PPE. Meanwhile, for the travel bubble area, there are rules that tourists must follow, namely allowed interaction with tourists or tour managers in a bubble area. Activities are only to be carried out in designated zones according to the specified itinerary. If you feel symptoms related to COVID-19 and there are close contacts in the bubble, you are required to carry out a PCR test, including medical evacuation according to the rules in force in Indonesia, or employees of the travel bubble area, with the following arrangements. Show a complete dose of COVID-19 vaccine certificate, negative PCR test results whose samples are taken a maximum of 3 times 24 before shifting and entering the bubble area. Work with a shift schedule for 14 days and stay overnight in the travel bubble area of Batam and Bintan during the shift schedule. Reporting to health workers in the travel area when experiencing symptoms. Perform the PCR examination on the 13th day, exit test to complete the work shift. So this is if you're tested positive, right? And you're only allowed to go home if the results are negative. Comply with the mechanism of close contact tracing, isolation, and quarantine that applies in Indonesia if a positive case of COVID-19 is found in the travel bubble area, related to the provision that medical evacuation costs are borne by the hotel manager. Okay, so there is a lot there. A lot. And there's, of course, a link. You can go back and look at this at your leisure if you think you are going to end up getting to come here through a travel bubble. I don't know. There's a lot of questions, and we'll get to that in the update and wrap up. And so let's go on to the next story. And what's happening with the Omicron variant in Indonesia? COVID-19 Omicron variant detected in Central Java. Yes, it's spreading. Central Police spokesman Iqbal Al-Qudusi said that based on results of whole genome sequencing, it was found that 9 people were positive for Omicron. According to him, the 9 cases were discovered in 4 regions: Semarang, Cilacap, Pekalongan, and Sukoharjo. And he encouraged the public to remain disciplined in complying with health protocols because the variant can spread faster than previous variants. He said, keep wearing a mask, limiting mobility, and washing your hands. And I don't know, I can never remember to wash my hands. I don't find that many hand washing stations anymore. That seems to be one of the things that's kind of disappeared. So the virus is spreading outside of the Jakarta area and waiting to see how fast it is going to spread throughout Java and around Indonesia, and still waiting for some confirmed cases in Bali. Well, I'm hoping that we won't have any, but we'll have to see. As usual, on Mondays, Luhut announces what is going to happen for the next week in terms of the PPKM, the community-based restrictions. And you remember from last video or 2 videos ago, it was dropped from 2 weeks to 1 week because of the spread of Omicron. And the restrictions, the PPKM, have extended for another week, of course, as everybody expected, and still at level 2. Greater Jakarta is still under PPKM level 2, Luhut. And Luhut is calling on everyone to stay alert and be aware of what's happening with the Omicron, which is beginning to spread more rapidly in Indonesia now. And he appealed to people to cut back on outdoor activities, follow health procedures. And he said, this has nothing to do with ranks. We are all the same. Once we contract Omicron, that's it. Or when we get Delta, that's what we got. And if you can hear the sound in the background, we have waves today. We have surf. Wow, it's weird. We never get surf. And it's been another beautiful day, and we'll talk about the weather tomorrow. Luhut said, based on what's happening in South Africa, Indonesia expecting a peak to occur sometime in mid to late February and through early March. And Luhut said that the bed occupancy rate, the BOR of hospitals on the islands of Java and Bali, are lower than that during the period when the Delta transmission began to climb. So he said that gives us some hope. What's happening with schooling? VP Maruf Amin calls for PTM evaluations Omicron Gallops. So the vice president has said that up to January 18th, 2022, there have been 41 schools from elementary to senior high schools in Jakarta where students have tested positive for COVID-19. As Pak Luhut has done in another segment, he said that it's predicted that the peak will be in February to the onset of March. So based on this, he's calling for an immediate evaluation of face-to-face learning. That is not a good sign. He also said that the spread of Omicron in the past few days has reached over 1,000 cases, and we have our first 2 deaths, although it should be noted that both of those were comorbidity cases. He said all ministries must anticipate and prevent Omicron from spreading further to avoid more victims. And he said everybody has to keep their eyes open. So everybody is saying the same thing from the government. Keep your eyes open, but this is not going to be as bad as it was with Delta. The vice president said if figures keep rising, the potential infections to people, particularly those with comorbidity, will put pressure on healthcare workers, and we have to prepare for these possibilities. He also ordered officials to step up the rate of vaccinations and testing in order to avert local transmissions, and he especially is concerned about the elderly, adults with health problems, and children. And Indonesia has opened up a travel bubble with Singapore. Yes, Singapore-Indonesia travel bubble opens health insurance requirement. So the Indonesian government is reopening international tourism with Singapore under a travel bubble policy with Batam and Bintan in the Riau Islands, and this will be started on January 24th, according to an official state circular. Remember, things aren't official unless you've got one of those SEs. The Coordinating Economic Affairs Minister, Pak Erlangga, said that international tourists who enter the country will be subject to requirements such as complete vaccinations, a PCR swab test with negative result, and 30,000 Singapore dollars worth of health insurance. Also, they will need to download the Peduli Lindungi app and have a blue card, a blue pass card. I'm not sure what that is. Visiting visas will be required for tourists who are not Singaporean natives or of ASEAN countries. And Minister Erlangga said that local COVID-19 task forces will be out in tourism sites to monitor the situation in order to suppress the spread of Omicron. And all tourism businesses in the Riau Islands will be required to fulfill the CHSE certificate. Pak Erlangga concluded that he hoped the travel bubble cooperation will boost the number of foreign tourists entering Indonesia amid the pandemic, and that this will encourage tourism activities. And, well, dropping the quarantine would encourage the activities with a few countries as well. So the capital relocation to Kalimantan is officially okayed. And here's a story. Indigenous people could be expelled from land for new capital, NGO. According to a rights group, tens of thousands of indigenous people are at risk of being expelled from their lands to make way for the construction of the new capital. According to the Indigenous Peoples Alliance of the Archipelago, Amin, at least 20,000 people from 21 indigenous groups live in the area designated for the construction of the new capital, with laws enabling the move from Jakarta not providing enough protection for those communities. According to Muhammad Arman, Amin's Policy, Law, and Human Rights Advocacy Director, the project will trigger problems such as confiscation of customary lands and criminalization of indigenous people when they try to defend their rights. And we've seen this happen all over the world, and it's happened here before too in other areas of Indonesia. According to the article, indigenous communities in Kalimantan have already been locked in an ongoing conflict with corporations which have been given plantation contracts around 30,000 hectares that overlap with customary lands. According to the spokesperson for the NGO, it's like a double run over for indigenous communities. First, they have to fight the business sector, and in the future, they will have to face their own government for the new capital project. A recent investigation carried out by Amin and other rights groups said that at least 162 permits for mining, plantations, forestry, and coal-based power plants have been granted in the new capital area. According to this, the location of the capital is going to be a site deep within the jungle of Kalimantan. The new state capital law, which provides a legal framework for President Jokowi's ambitious $32 billion mega project, stipulates how development of the capital will be funded and governed. The new capital has a central function and is the symbol of the identity of the nation, as well as a new center of economic gravity. The proposed city will cover around 56,180 hectares, 216 square miles, for those of you not used to hectares. In total, 256,142 hectares have been set aside for the project, with additional land earmarked for potential future expansion. There goes the rainforest. Early plans for the new capital depict a utopian design aimed at creating an environmentally friendly smart city, but few details have been confirmed. Plans to begin construction in 2022 were put aside due to the pandemic. The development of the area will take place in several stages and planned on completion in 2045. Environmentalist critics of the new capital have warned it could damage ecosystems in the region, where mining and palm oil plantations already threaten the rainforests that are home to Borneo's endangered species, including the orangutan, not to mention the indigenous people. Progress always a good thing. I taught a course on this at Berkeley one time. And maybe in response to what was in the previous segment, East Kalimantan residents urged not to be provoked over a new capital city. So the province secretariat's head of administration bureau conveyed this call. He argued that the public must be patient in responding to various issues and views of certain parties. He said these views could disturb a regional situation. And so he asked everybody to be patient and grateful. He said, let's just say that the UUIKN, the capital city law, is the most beautiful gift that the people of East Kalimantan can get. He said he hopes that the public will not respond by circulating issues from people who reject the relocation of the capital. What's important, he said, is to stay calm and not be easily provoked. He said people have their opinions. What's certain is East Kalimantan has officially become the location for the capital city relocation, and that people should prepare themselves for the relocation and focus on welcoming the relocation. Let's maintain the peace that's been built by far, he said. And what about the Philippines? The other day I mentioned during the update, the Philippines were considering phasing out the travel quarantine. Well, phase out of travel quarantine urged. So the presidential advisor for entrepreneurship is proposing the gradual lifting of COVID-19 quarantine restrictions once the Omicron surge subsides. Mr. Concepcion said phasing out facility-based quarantine for international travelers and shifting to home-based quarantine would help the country's tourism and airline sectors recover faster. He said countries like Thailand and Switzerland have done away with mandatory quarantine on arrival in a move to attract more travelers. Well, Thailand reinstituted it, and it looks like on the 1st they're going to get rid of it again. He said, we're not suggesting to get rid of it immediately. What we're proposing is a gradual move towards the removal of the quarantine in the Philippines and moving towards home quarantine rather than facility-based quarantine. He said quarantining did not help the country keep out COVID-19 variants such as Delta and Omicron. The entry requirements are so extensive and complicated, he said, that they put the country out of reach of international visitors and even returning Filipinos. He said, I think it's about time to move on. I think we will definitely be left behind if we remain stagnant. And you hear this refrain over and over from countries about tourism and having to do something about the quarantine. Indonesia at this point is holding fast. And Mr. Concepcion also recommended that negative antigen test results be accepted as a travel requirement for arrivals. He said, I thought the idea of the antigen test prior to departure within 24 hours is good enough to provide comfort. And he noted that the negative antigen result is now accepted in the U.S. And during this event, the testing czar of the Philippines agreed with Concepcion, saying, we also need to have a dramatic change in mindset. Another participant in this meeting, a research fellow, said that it was highly unlikely that a more vicious variant of the virus would appear. He said that according to a scientific study in the journal Nature, COVID will eventually become like the common flu, with only the vulnerable requiring vaccinations and mitigation measures. He said it's time to move from crisis to control, from fear to responsibility. However, ACTA research fellow Dr. David has advised against lowering the alert levels until the region achieves moderate risk classification. He believes that if the downtrend is sustained, Metro Manila could revert to a less strict alert level 2 by February. And earthquake in Lombok. Earthquake hits Mataram this morning. Tremor reaches Bali. So this was from yesterday. A quake was reported centered on land 10 kilometers southeast of West Lombok. According to the BMKG, the Meteorology, Climatology, and Geophysics Agency, the quake occurred at 4:14 in the morning and measured a magnitude of 4.6 and came from a depth of 10 kilometers. The strongest tremors were level 4 on the MMI scale, and that was in Mataram. Weaker tremors were also felt in Denpasar, Badung, Padang Bai, Karangasem, and Bali, as well as West Lombok, Central Lombok, North Lombok, and East Lombok. And all of these were recorded at level 3 on the MMI scale. And here in Singaraja, we didn't feel anything. Well, I wasn't awake at 4 o'clock in the morning, so I don't know. But if you were in a different part, if you were in Lombok, did you feel anything? There's no reports of damage or injuries yet. That's a good thing. And anybody in Bali feel it down in the south? If you were in Denpasar, Sanur, I know we got people down in the south. Okay, so something to remember. We have a lot of natural disasters in Indonesia, unfortunately. Part of the price of living here. A member of one of Bali's royal families died in December. Bali bids goodbye to King Pemecutan in grand cremation ceremony. The extensive ritual for Anak Agung Nur Manik Parasara, who died in December at the age of 76, started on January 2nd and culminated on the main event this past Friday. Enthusiastic locals and tourists crowded the ceremony in Denpasar for the traditional royal cremation ceremony held to release the soul of the departed. Once that's completed, it's believed they will be able to reach the upper realm where the soul awaits rebirth. Royal family members paraded by, shaded by gilded black umbrellas. Dozens of men in traditional Balinese dress carried the king's body in a colorful 10-meter tall wooden tower along with a massive ogo-ogo. The remains of Parasara, who is known as the King of Pemecutan, were cremated and his ashes will be thrown into the sea. He was known as a spiritual leader and an advocate of religious tolerance. Yes, something we can use and always hurts when we lose advocates of religious tolerance, especially in Indonesia. And Bali's governor, in keeping with the COVID-19 rules and regulations, ordered all officials to take a COVID-19 test before the event. And some more news in Bali, more construction. Of course, during this time of the pandemic and a lot of businesses not functional anymore, there's been a lot of construction all over the island, from private houses, hotels, and Sanur Port Terminal construction begins, targeted to finish May 2022. So the terminal facility is going to be able to serve tourists more appropriately, and locals can sell delicious Balinese culinary delights there, said the Transportation Minister Provoked. The construction of the terminal building was marked by the first drilling activities and is targeted for completion this May, so not far away. Provoked said he hopes that the existence of the port will increase the interest of tourists to vacation in what he calls the Golden Triangle, which is Sanur, Nusa Penida, and Nusa Lembongan. And before the port was built, the ships in Sanur docked without a pier. As you know, if you've been to Sanur at all, you'll see tourists wading out to their boats to take them to the other islands. And, well, I've done that kind of stuff myself when I used to work on a cruise ship. Well, it can be a little challenging if there's waves and if you're carrying a bunch of junk with you. So the port is supposed to help stimulate tourism to the other islands. I guess that's a good thing. I haven't seen this, but there was a video by the monkeys that I saw last night, and it was about Sanur and all the construction going on there. You might want to take a look at that, and I'll put a link to it right here. Everybody knows about the economic situation in Bali and how bad it's been, and it has improved so far over the first year, which was disastrous. It's still bad, and there have been calls, including from the governor, to diversify the economy in Bali, but there hasn't been a whole lot done about it so far. And here is another voice. The finance minister of Indonesia, Sri Mulyani, asked Bali to don't just rely on tourism. So she said in a speech last week that the Bali provincial government should start developing another industry such as agriculture to support the economy. She said there's a large international demand for organic products, and Bali, with its great potential with the Subak irrigation system and land potential for organic farming, is a perfect place to do this. She said this can help revive the economy during the pandemic. Of course, a lot of the land has been turned into villas and hotels because everybody wants to live in the middle of the sawa until it's gone. She reminded Bali to use the COVID-19 pandemic as a lesson to stop relying on one source of income. And she also said that Bali needs to develop its small and medium businesses, otherwise known as UMKM in Indonesia. She said the UMKM industry makes up 61.07% of the GDP and was able to absorb 97% of the total workforce and 60% of the total investment in Indonesia. She said the government would provide massive support to the UMKM industry by offering loans, interest rate subsidies, and technical assistance. Sounds good. Will it happen? And what are the details and how do you go about doing it? A lot of questions there, but definitely Bali needs to diversify its economy. This is not going to be the last disaster that hits us. And when disasters hit, tourism drops. Okay, time for update wrap-up. First, the bubble news. So the Minister of Communication and Information, Johnny Gerald Plate, said that the government will implement a travel bubble scheme for implementation of G20. Okay, this is another one that just came in as I was getting ready to finish this up. So the travel bubble scheme is devised to work with G20 participants, and it's also going to be used in Mandalika and in Singapore. According to this article, the G20 is going to have 158 meetings in 19 cities and involve 20,988 delegates. And according to Minister Johnny, the travel bubble was applied during the implementation of the national games that were held in Papua, and I think was that back in December or November. And so the travel bubble is considered successful in suppressing the potential for epidemic transmission and will subsequently be applied to various international agendas such as the G20 and the MotoGP. Okay, so that's all for updates. What about the wrap-up? Well, there's a number of questions with the lead story about Pak Sandiaga and the increase in flights to Bali. What are the restrictions on flights that he mentions? He said those are going to be changed, they're going to be revised. I wasn't aware that there were any restrictions per se other than coming direct, but so that's a question. What is a local, as I already mentioned in the article, a long discussion about that in the article, and who's going to be in the bubble besides the few countries that were mentioned so far. What about Australia? What about the European countries? What about US? How is that going to work? Who's going to be there? And are the requirements going to be changed? Are they going to be modified? And what does this mean in relation to direct flights to Bali? Are direct flights in Bali going to be dependent on the travel bubble arrangement now? So as often with government pronouncements, there seems to be more questions that come up than answers given. We'll just have to wait and see, as I always say. And with new numbers dramatically increasing in terms of the new cases, will the PPKM levels change next week, or will we continue on at level 2? Gonna have to wait and see about that. So far, the government is holding firm with level 2. But numbers are going up, including here in Bali. Will there be more restrictions next week? I don't know. We'll have to wait until next Monday and find out. And after 3 wonderful days of sun and wind, last night we had a monster storm here, and thunder was so loud it rattled the windows in my room. It was loud. Okay, so that's it. I'd like to welcome new subscribers. Thanks a lot. And for those of you who are friends of my children are pushing this channel now that their mom is doing the cooking videos. Thanks for subscribing, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you found this video helpful, useful, interesting, amusing, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. Be kind to someone today. Thanks for viewing. Stay safe, and I will see you again on Sunday.